Senate Democrats brief reporters on their opposition to President Trump's executive order on carbon emissions and the lifting of the moratorium on new coal mining on federal lands. This briefing is 30 minutes.
All rise. Just kidding. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us today. Our new EPA Administrator, Scott Pruitt, likes to quote Yogi Berra, who once said famously, "The future ain't what it used to be. The future ain't what it used to be." Well, this executive order that President Trump is literally signing right now in real time will ensure that that's the case, that the future ain't going to be what it used to be. That executive order abandons the progress that we've made addressing the threat of climate change, protecting Americans' health from dangerous pollutants, and safeguarding our environment for future generations. Thanks to this executive order, our future is looking darker, it's looking dirtier, and it's looking less prosperous. It's worth highlighting why the Clean Power Plan, which President Trump is walking away from today, is so historic, and what went into its development. We didn't just dream it up like that. Clean Power Plan is the most significant step that the U.S. has taken to address climate change. First ever, it establishes first ever national standards to reduce pollution from existing power plants, the largest source of greenhouse gases. The Clean Power Plan cuts greenhouse gas emissions by 1/3 by the year 2030. The Clean Power Plan is a result of unprecedented outreach to states, to tribes, to utilities, to stakeholders, and to the American public. The Obama administration spent over 3 years developing the rule, including reviewing and responding to more than 4.3 million comments that the EPA received. The final rule incorporates that input and gives states and utilities time to preserve ample, reliable, and affordable power for all Americans. Clean Power Plan is expected to produce between $26 to $45 billion in net benefits by 2030, between $26 and $45 billion in net benefits by 2030. The Obama administration, following the 14 hottest years on record, did their homework. Today, Donald Trump is shirking our nation's responsibility, disregarding clear science, and undoing the significant progress that we've made to ensure we leave a better, more sustainable planet for generations to come with a stroke of his pen. And despite all the rhetoric, this order clearly proves that this administration is not serious about protecting jobs or our environment. Under the Obama administration, we saw the longest stretch of continuous job growth, the longest running growth in jobs in this country, I think, in U.S. history. 16 million jobs and counting. Thanks to investments we've made over the last 8 years, 3.2 million people have a job in clean energy sector today. The Clean Power Plan is part of an all-of-the-above energy strategy, as is the nearly $20 billion that we spent investing in clean coal since 2009, I think all of which I've supported, and I suspect we all have. I'm a native of West Virginia, some of you know. My dad actually worked in a coal mine when he was a young man. I understand the plight of coal miners in today's day and age. But the Clean Power Plan isn't the coal industry's problem. Market forces are the problem. Let's be perfectly clear. This executive order will not bring back the coal industry. And Donald Trump saying so otherwise is just not true. It's an insult to the men and women who voted for him. We should be looking to the future. We should be looking to continuing to foster new economic opportunities in communities that may be dependent on the old world order, just as a Clean Power Plan does. I think this is a time for leadership and a matter of leadership. Americans don't sit back and wait for others to take the lead to address global challenges. That's what we do. Our country has always led by example, and addressing climate change should be no different. Today is a step backward, not forward. But I will continue, I think we will continue to fight to defend the Clean Power Plan and smart policies that address global climate change so that one day we can look at our grandchildren right in the eye and tell them that we did the right thing for them. We fought to give them and this planet a better future. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben Cardin. I should have mentioned we got a couple of posters, and one to our right, and it shows job growth and loss of jobs going back a couple of decades. And since 2010, we're off to the races. 16 million jobs and counting. And over here, we have a great picture of the Brooklyn Bridge. Congressman Markey and I used to go running when we were in Central America. We'd go running together. But the air never looked like that, did Eddie? Never looked like this. But that's the way it looked. And I've run in California, places in California where it just looked almost that bad. And we don't want to go back there. We don't want to go back there. Ben, thank you.
Well, let me thank Senator Carper for his leadership, not just on this issue dealing with the Clean Power Plant rule, but his leadership on behalf of environmental issues, his leadership on the EPW committee. And I'm pleased to be here with so many of my colleagues to point out just how disappointing, how wrong the Trump administration's action today is in reversing the Clean Power Plant regulation issued by the Obama administration and the other parts of their policies that they're announcing today on energy. It's wrong because it's now going to add a great deal of uncertainty as to what our policy is going to be in regards to power plants in this country. That's not going to be good for anyone. Predictability is critically important for moving forward with predictable energy sources. And the Trump administration has now caused a great deal of uncertainty. We know that carbon pollution needs to be controlled, and this was a plan that was developed after careful consideration and gave maximum flexibilities to the states. They could pick the way in which to meet their goals. I know in my state of Maryland, our leaders appreciated that flexibility and could easily work with that flexibility and had the support of all the stakeholders in how we were moving forward. That now is on hold. We don't know what the rules are going to be. An energy policy for our country needs to deal with energy security, stability, needs to deal with the economy, and needs to deal with the environment and public health. In each of these cases, the actions by the Trump administration have compromised America's interests. On security, we know that renewable and clean energy are an area where we can be very competitive and have a stable source of energy for America's future. That's in jeopardy now by the Trump administration's policies. We know, as Senator Carper pointed out, we create more jobs with clean energy than we do with the fossil fuels. And yet, the Trump administration is moving us on the wrong way as far as helping our economy. And there is no dispute as to the impact of carbon emissions, greenhouse gases, to our environment and public health. We know how many children are at risk with asthma as more and more pollution enters our air. And we know that the largest single source of carbon emissions in this country come from fossil burning electricity plants. We know that. That's the facts. And what the Trump administration is doing today is compromising our ability to deal with carbon emissions, which is not in the interest of America and compromises America's global leadership on this issue of climate change. For all those reasons, this is a very dark day for America in the decisions made by the Trump administration. And with that, I want to turn to one of our great leaders on these issues, the senator from Rhode Island, Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Ben.
Before you speak, I have to run downstairs to join Senator Schumer for a few minutes on ACA. I'll be back. But I want to thank you. I want to thank Jeff. I want to thank Eddie. And I want to thank all of you. I'll be back.
Well, let me thank our ranking member for the powerful leadership he's showing us on the Environment and Public Works Committee. I was elected to the Senate in 2006. I was sworn in 2007. The first 3 years that I was here, there was constant Republican activity to do something about climate change. Over and over, there were bills. Republican John Warner had a bill. Republican Susan Collins had a bill. Republican Lamar Alexander had a bill. Republican John McCain campaigned on this issue for president. Then came Citizens United. January of 2010. There has not been a piece of Republican-sponsored serious climate legislation since. The power of the fossil fuel industry made the Republican Party in Congress, in effect, a banana republic party. We call a banana republic because of the power of the international fruit companies who pulled the strings behind the preposterous uniforms and antics of propped up administrations in those banana republic countries. So it's sad to have the Republican Party in Congress become a banana republic party to the fossil fuel industry. With this executive order, the executive branch of government becomes a banana republic executive branch, prancing and capering for their friends in the fossil fuel industry. It is ultimately probably not going to make much difference. There are lawyers and there are lawsuits. There is an Administrative Procedures Act that means that administrative procedures have to be on the up and up. There is a Supreme Court decision, Massachusetts versus EPA, that is the law of the land. There is not that much room to maneuver. But we will lose two things. One, we will lose time while the lawyers and the lawsuits go forward, and that is not a commodity without risk. The second thing that we will lose is we will lose our reputation. Go to any state university in this country, go to all of the other countries that look to America around the world. Everybody understands perfectly well what's going on. This executive order only demeans Donald Trump himself, his administration, and ultimately our country. The fossil fuel industry needs to be held to account here. They are pulling the strings that are causing this to take place. They are hiding their hand behind front groups and behind lobby groups, but the American people should know that this moment of national embarrassment is brought to you by the fossil fuel industry. And I hand off to Jeff Merkley.
Thank you. I am honored to be here with this group of 5 senators who are climate champions, who are fighting for clean water and for clean air, and specifically to take on the carbon pollution that's having such an impact. But across the city, there's another group. There is Vice President Pence and Secretary Perry and Secretary Zinke and EPA Director Pruitt, and they are standing up right now talking about how they're going to dismantle regulations on carbon pollution. Well, this is a very big thing. Carbon pollution is destroying the resources of rural America. It is destroying our forests, our farming, and our fishing. The fire season in Oregon is now 2 months longer than it was decades ago. The streams are warmer and smaller because of the smaller snowpack in the mountains. Over on the coast, we have the difficulty of oysters being unable to reproduce correctly because the water is so much more acidic because the burning of fossil fuels has become carbon dioxide, has become carbonic acid, and is making it very hard for shellfish to start their life. Not to mention coral reefs around the world. 80% of the Great Barrier Reef dying in the last few years. The list goes on and on and on wherever you look. So that group of 4 that is assembled across the city is standing up and saying we are going to try to increase the destruction of our forests, increase the destruction of our farming with less irrigation water, increase the destruction of our fishing. And we are here to say no. We are here to say we are going to resist this in every possible way we can. And let me mention that one of the things that they are talking about today is they're going to renew coal leasing of resources, coal resources, that we own as citizens. All of us are fossil fuel barons by virtue of being a U.S. citizens. We own a lot of gas and a lot of oil and a lot of coal. And President Obama said it's time to stop profiting off this coal because we can't continue to extract it and burn it, given the crisis to the environment around the world in carbon pollution. And now we have our new president, Trump, standing up and saying, let's increase that pollution. Let's keep profiting off extracting what we own as citizens out of the ground. So a group of us will be introducing the Keep It in the Ground bill later today to say no more extraction, no leasing, no new leases of citizen-owned fossil fuels. So we're going to keep fighting. We're going to use every strategy, as my colleague indicated, and we will go forward attempting to restore America as a leader in this movement around the world, because if we as a human civilization on this planet are going to stop this menace to our beautiful blue-green earth, we need the cooperation of all nations, and we need American leadership. And that's what we'll be fighting to restore. And I'm so delighted to introduce my colleague, Ed Markey, who has been a leader on this before people even knew there was an issue.
Thank you, Jeff. Jeff and Sheldon and Tom Copper and Ben Codden and I, we stand here not as five people who are fighting the Trump executive order. We're standing really with the vast majority of the American people who accept the science of climate change, who accept the need to move to a clean energy agenda. This is an issue which has overwhelming public support. And so what Sheldon is talking about, what Jeff is talking about, are issues that are now agreed upon by the vast majority of the American people. President Trump didn't issue an executive order. He issued a declaration of war on Americans' climate leadership and our clean energy future. This executive order isn't about energy security. It is about climate denial. It is the wholesale dismantling of every policy and rule that President Obama put on the books to cut carbon pollution and address climate change. This executive order is one massive giveaway to big oil and coal corporations at the expense of decades of progress on climate change, clean energy, and public health protections. President Trump last week released a budget that ends federal research and development funding for 21st century innovative energy technologies, and now he wants to send us back to the 19th century of energy policy, energy technology, and energy science. That's the Trump administration formula on climate change. Deny, delay, defund, and that would be a disaster. If Donald Trump were really committed to energy security, he wouldn't have signed an executive order last week to weaken fuel economy standards in the vehicles we drive. He wouldn't have signed an executive order to advance the Dakota Access and Keystone pipelines without ensuring that the Keystone oil actually stays in America and is not just exported. We still import more than 3 million barrels of oil per day from OPEC nations. Keeping strong fuel economy standards in place is the best way to increase American energy security and decrease carbon pollution. And when there is nothing to ensure that the Keystone oil won't simply be exported abroad, the promise that the KXL will help our energy security is as hollow as the pipeline itself. All risk, no reward for the United States. We need to put America on a path towards a 100% clean and renewable energy future, and that's what Jeff Merkley and Sheldon Whitehouse represent as we stand here today. Climate change is threatening the health of American families now. Global warming gets personal when air pollution harms the lungs of the children of our country and increases the risk of food and water and insect-transmitted diseases around the world. As a nation, we have a choice. We can continue to pump harmful carbon pollution into our skies and foreign oil into our cars, or we can pump new life into our economy, creating clean energy jobs and saving Americans money on their energy costs. We need job creation that is good for all of creation. We know that by cutting carbon pollution, we can grow our economy, save American families money, and protect the health of children and seniors. And we know that the competition to create clean energy jobs is global. President Trump's actions will put America last in the global clean energy race, and will lose out on jobs here at home. President Trump is more focused on fulfilling campaign promises to the oil, gas, and coal industries at the expense of all of the promise of a clean energy future for all of Americans. That's what today represents an historic day in this fight to have a 21st century innovation energy industry that is led by the United States.
Going once? Yes.
Esther Whelan with Politico. I was wondering if you could give a little more detail about what you exactly hope to do to stop this. Is there anything you can do, like your appropriations, or there's this one bill you've introduced, but any other proactive actions you can take?
I think the heart of the battle is going to be litigation. If you look at the Clean Power Plan, you start at the very top with the United States Supreme Court decision, Massachusetts versus EPA, that says carbon dioxide is a pollutant. You follow that with a decision by the EPA that it's a dangerous pollutant. The endangerment finding both has been made and it was promised by Administrator Pruitt that he would leave it intact. And I trust him on this, because if they tried to open that question up, they'd get slaughtered. So there you have those two pieces in place, the law of the land and the requisite finding. That puts a legal duty on Administrator Pruitt to proceed with regulation of carbon dioxide. And unless he wishes to behave illegally, then he has to come up with something. And I don't think there's much he could come up with that would be more amenable to industry than the Clean Power Plan. So I don't think he has a lot of real running room other than to delay for a bit and force that litigation. The problem is that if you're acting in bad faith, there are a variety of consequences that can ensue in a courtroom. So they're playing with fire here, and I think we're going to find that they're going to be burning their fingers in the weeks and months ahead. But I think it's mostly going to be litigation. I think the strongest thing for us is going to be holding the funding for these agencies through the process. I don't think they're going to have the either the courage or the bad judgment to shut down the government over trying to defund the protection for American citizens on environmental issues. So that means we will outblink them when it comes to that issue. And I think at the end of April, you'll see a budget that satisfactorily supports all of our environmental agencies.
I will just add that you're going to see the battle continue at the federal level, but you're going to also see a shift to the grassroots. All across America, the boards of colleges, the city councils of our towns and cities, many organizations are starting to say, how can we take this responsibility to clean up carbon pollution into our own hands? And that means developing their own 100 by 50 plan, 100% clean and renewable energy by 2050. We will be introducing a 100 by 50 bill here on Capitol Hill, but we understand with the Republican control of the House and the Senate and the fact that the Koch brothers are the puppet masters behind what happens in this body, that those bills are not going to be considered, but it will be a way of also rooting for, encouraging, laying out that vision for every organization in America, every church board, synagogue board, mosque board, college, city, to say, let's do it ourselves. Let's develop our own 100 by 50 resolution and a 3 to 5 year action plan on what steps we can take.
Senator, The White House says that Clean Power Plan hangs on the endangerment that was made just for automobiles. Your response?
The endangerment finding addresses the question of what CO2 does in the atmosphere. Whether the CO2 comes from the tailpipe of an automobile or the smokestack of a factory, it's chemically the same. And the finding has the same application across the board. And we know that it does two things. We know to a certainty that it creates a greenhouse gas environment in the atmosphere that warms the planet. And we know that when it interacts with the surface of the sea, it acidifies the water. Not only do we know those as theory, we're actually measuring those changes take place in practice exactly consistent with the theory. So if they want to try to go and relitigate that point, God bless them. But I think there's a reason that Scott Pruitt said he would not relitigate it when he spoke to us in the Environment Public Works Committee. He knows that that conversation would be a catastrophic loser for the phony climate denial apparatus.
So you're saying the White House is wrong. And for the record, I'm Steve Kerwood from Living on Earth. You're saying the White House is wrong.
In how many ways? Yes.
Senators, this executive order has a lot of other targets in it besides the Clean Power Plan, including getting rid of this NEPA guidance that has a lot to do with making agencies take into account climate impacts from all kinds of infrastructure projects. And I'm just wondering, we're looking at a $1 trillion infrastructure plan by Trump. Do you think Senate Democrats would try to put some language into that type of funding to sort of restore the requirement of these climate reviews?
I don't want to prejudge that. Bear in mind that under the Administrative Procedures Act, an agency that is bound to follow first the law of the United States of America and second factual sworn evidence and obligated to meet a standard that it cannot make decisions that are arbitrary or capricious, has some limits on what it can do. Those agencies are not bound to do what the President of the United States tells them to do. They're bound to follow the law. And on many of these issues, the law and the facts and the standard will all keep them pretty close to where they now are, simply because that's where reality is. So it is, as I said, going to take a lot of litigation to force that point. But when the dust settles, I think most of these agencies will find themselves more or less in the place where they already are, because that's where the facts require them to be and where the law requires them to be.
Okay, last question. You mentioned the CR. I'm just wondering, have you been working with Republicans on that so far, and what are the chances of a government shutdown?
I think that's a prospect, particularly after their debacle on health care, that the Republicans don't want. They want a lot more out of this budget confrontation than we do. So I think we have a strong negotiating position. They just passed appropriations bills several months ago, led by their Republican majority. And if we ask for a simple continuing resolution, which is a customary default proposition, or if we ask them to go to the spending levels that they just agreed to in all of their appropriations measures, I think we're in reasonably good shape with the American people. I think the American people say the Democrats are not being unreasonable holding the Republicans to what they just agreed to. So I doubt this is a confrontation that they want. This is, to a significant degree, another circumstance of the Republican Party getting close to catching a bus that they've been chasing for a long time and then not actually knowing what to do with it when they caught it, just like health care. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
He gets credit for being the last one here, right?
Oh, thanks.